Hello, everyone. My name is Martin Agoje, the National President of ISSUP Nigeria chapter. Thank you for joining us today at this third session of ISSUP Nigeria bi-monthly webinar tagged ISSUP Nigeria Knowledge Update Series. We're excited to have you join us. We do hope you will join us again and make our time in our next session, which is the fourth session, or will be the fourth session, scheduled for January 28, 2021. Today, we shall be looking at another very important topic, which is drug use, addiction, and the family. And to lead us in today's discussion is Dr. Gboyega Abikoye. To join me in moderating this session is one of my colleagues, Dr. Bawo James. Bawo, Public Relations Officer for ISSUP Nigeria chapter. Bawo, you are most welcome.
Thank you, Martin.
So at this point, let me hand over to Bawo to take it up from here and introduce our speaker for the day. Once again, you are welcome.
Thank you very much, Martin. Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning if you wherever, or good evening wherever you may be watching this webinar from. We have an interesting topic today on drug use and addiction and the family and support systems. And we have a very competent and erudite scholar to talk to us on the topic. I'll introduce him. He is Dr. Abikoye, and is a member of the Board of Trustees and the General Secretary of ISSUP Nigeria chapter. He is also a Deputy Director at the Center for Research and Information on Substance Abuse, CRISA, in Uyo, Nigeria. Dr. Abikoye received his PhD in clinical psychology from the University of Ibadan, Nigeria, and started his career first as a clinical psychologist with the Dutch section of Medecins Sans Frontières, MSF, Holland, from where he joined the University of Uyo as a faculty member and rose through the ranks to become associate professor in 2014. He was one time head of the Department of Psychology and vice dean of the Faculty of Social Sciences at the University of Uyo. He was also head of Department of Clinical Psychology at the Faculty of Clinical Sciences in Niger Delta University, Wilberforce Island. As a researcher, Dr. Abikoye has published widely on epidemiology and psychosocial underpinnings of substance use, prevention and treatment of substance use disorders, psychopathology, and health-related quality of life. Dr. Abikoye was a recipient of the Federal Government of Nigeria Postgraduate Scholarship Award in 2001, the Postdoctoral Fellowship of the Northwest University, South Africa in 2013, as well as research and travel grants from the Tertiary Education Trust Fund, TED Fund, the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, and the National Institute for Drug Abuse, NIDA. He's also had grants from Kettle-Brom Society, KBS, Center for Population and Environmental Development, CPED. He was appointed into the National Technical Committee of the UNODC's response to drugs and related organized crime in Nigeria in 2014. He's a fellow of the Nigerian Psychological Association and the Nigerian Association of Clinical Psychologists, NACP, and a member of the Australian Center on Quality of Life. He's the editor-in-chief of the Nigerian Journal of Clinical Psychology, regional editor for West Africa of the African Journal of Drug and Alcohol Studies, and a member of the editorial board of several other journals. Dr. Abikoye, you're welcome. You could now proceed with the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, my National Publicity Secretary. Thank you, my President, Dr. Martin Agoge. It's a privilege, it's a great honor for Mr. President and the ESCO of Nigerian chapter to afford me this opportunity to lead this discussion today, for which I'm very grateful. I'm also thankful to the ISSUP Global, especially Olivia and her team, for providing necessary technical support to make this discussion a reality. Today, I'll be leading this discussion on drug use, addiction, and the family support system. I'll start by taking us back a bit on memory lane. For a long time now, society viewed addiction as a moral failing, and the individual with substance use disorder was seen as a weakling or someone who simply lacked self-control. Thanks to new advances in brain imaging and other scientific breakthrough, however, we now know that addiction is a disease characterized by profound disruption in particular routes or circuits in the brain. And using addictive drugs can evolve from controlled social use into compulsive relapsing disorder that characterizes addiction. This transition to addiction results from genetic, developmental, social, and other vulnerabilities, coupled with pharmacologically induced plasticity in certain brain circuitry that strengthens learned drug-related associated behavior at the expense of adaptive responding to natural rewards. And I want to mention that implicit in all this are important familial variables. The family, therefore, has important roles to play in prevention, in treatment, as well as in recovery. And failure of families to get involved or getting involved in dysfunctional ways can actually worsen the situation significantly. So today, I believe that at the end of this discussion, we should be better able to highlight the importance of the family in drug abuse prevention, treatment, and recovery. We should be able to demonstrate the interplay of biological and familial factors in drug abuse and addiction, to highlight common challenges faced by families or persons with drug use and dysfunctional roles that family members assume, and to also be able to identify some evidence-based family approaches to drug abuse and addiction. You observe that I use drug abuse, addiction interchangeably. Please, I hope you pardon me for that. While we all agree that they are not exactly the same, the difference being mainly in terms of severity and in terms of the number of DSM criteria met by the individual. And again, it's often very difficult to draw a line as to where and when an individual actually crosses the line from drug abuse to outright addiction. So please, for convenience sake and for practical purposes, I will be using these terms interchangeably. The individual exists in the context of a larger family. And when we say family, it can be the traditional family that most people are used to, including in a traditional family is one in which individuals are joined by blood, by marriage, or by law. And this include intact heterosexual couples, single parents, blood relatives, adoptive families, foster relationships, grandparents raising children, step families, and so forth. On the other hand, families also include the elected family. The elected family is self-identified. In other words, it is a situation in which individuals are joined by choice rather than the usual ties of blood, marriage, or law. And interestingly, the elected family, the bond in elected family, in some elected families, can even be stronger than that, than those in the traditional families. So when we are discussing family in this context, we take cognizance of this, and we are referring to both the traditional family as well as the elected family. Examples of elected family include godparents and other non-biologically related people who have an emotional ties. Also, some emancipated youth who chose to live among peers. Also, some gay and lesbian couples or groups and minor children all living under the same roof. These are all examples of elected family, and they also exert very huge influence on the family. Now, the family is important because of certain characteristics. There are many of these characteristics, but in this discussion, we are just going to consider the three primary ones, namely non-summativity. This implies that the family as a whole is greater than and different from the sum of its individual members. In other words, the contributions of members of a family collectively is more robust and is far greater than the contributions of individual members added together when the contribution is made separately. So the collectivity thing is very key here. Also, secular causality implies that individuals in the family affect one another. The behavior of one person has a ripple effect on the other members of the family, and vice versa, and then the circle goes on and on and on. And lastly, families strive to maintain homeostasis or equilibrium. It's a primary goal of the family. Anytime something goes wrong or something is perceived to have gone wrong, members of the family strive to maintain balance. Unfortunately, in many instances, wrong approaches are adopted in an effort to maintain this balance. These are some of the things that this discussion will address. Addiction has been referred to as a disease of the family, and I quite agree with this. The reason is that familial factors play important roles in the etiology, in the cause, as well as in the outcome of drug use and addiction. Addiction affects the entire family system, and the individuals who comprise it, because it puts family members under a great deal of stress, disrupting routines and causing unsettling or even frightening experiences. Family units becomes a fragile and dysfunctional system, and members end up developing unhealthy coping strategies as they try to maintain equilibrium. Particularly affected are children whose educational, mental, social, physical, and other domains of human development are adversely affected. For instance, there's ample empirical evidence suggesting that children from substance use disorder family are 4 times more likely to become addicted themselves as adults. So the impact of the family cannot be overemphasized. Addiction has also been referred to as a disease of neuroplasticity. As time goes on, I'll make an attempt to link this, how the family comes into this. Neuroplasticity essentially is the ability of the nervous system to change its activity in response to intrinsic or extrinsic stimuli by reorganizing its structure, its functions, or its connections. In the past, people commonly believe that the human brain can only change. In the case of an infant, after a certain age, the brain refuses, stops to change, or that the brain becomes unmodifiable later on as the individual grows. But studies have shown that this is not true, that the human brain continues to change and can be modified by stimuli, especially by the forces of learning, that classical conditioning, operant conditioning, modeling, and all forms of, and that's where the family comes in. Because addiction, going by the family tradition, family explanation of addiction is seen as a result of maladaptive interaction patterns in the family. such that the addicted individual now looks out to get solace from something, usually drugs for most individuals. Initially, that may not be a problem, but with continued and persistent use, then it leads to something very serious. So neuroplasticity implies that the brain is always learning. The brain is resilient, it is adaptive, it is dynamic. In fact, it's more dynamic than we can ever imagine. So the brain is not as static as we thought. So the brain keeps responding to input and stimuli. Now, the brain is resilient, but unfortunately, the brain is neutral. The brain is neutral. The brain does not know the difference between good and bad. It learns based on whatever is repeated, whether helpful or unhelpful. The brain, with repeated learning, the brain acquires a different set of behavior. And recovery entails repetitively using neuroplasticity to the client's advantage by creating new cues, new triggers, and motivators. And to me, the best entity that can help in doing this is the family. The circuits of the brain affected mainly by drug abuse or addiction include the nucleus accumbens, the ventral pallidum, which are implicated in the reward salience, the amygdala and the hippocampus that play very key role in memory and learning, the prefrontal cortex and the anterior cingulate gyrus, which have been implicated in inhibitory control. It's because drug has hijacked these functions that the individual no longer can say no. The individual loses control. And of course, the area of the brain that regulates motivated behavior, especially the orbitofrontal cortex and the subcallosal cortex. These are the various parts of the brain that are virtually hijacked by addictive drugs. The motivational system and the emotional memory are virtually hijacked by drugs. Drug-seeking actions that were initially intentional responses, in the case of maybe occasional users or experimental users, become involuntary habits because the part of the brain that regulates voluntary actions and motivation have been virtually hijacked. The system that should respond to salient stimuli is focusing only on drugs and drug-related stimuli. For instance, a study by Milton and Everett in 2012 found that cocaine addict's brain is no longer activated by monetary reward. We all know that for most of us, for most human beings, monetary reward is a key factor, is a big motivator. But in this study and some similar empirical studies, it was found that the natural rewards loses their potency in case of drug addicted individuals. Addiction is drug-induced neuroplasticity because addiction neuroplasticity is traceable to faulty family dynamics and dysfunctional interactions in the family. Of course, detoxification is a common procedure in addiction treatment, but we all know that detoxification simply removes the drug from the system and then treat possible withdrawal syndrome. But the essence of drugs go far beyond this. It's a long-term something. It goes beyond, and that's why relapse happens. That's why it appears that the problem goes away and comes, and people keep coming back. It's because of addiction. It's not something that will go away overnight. For instance, in a study by Osha and his colleagues, it was found that even after 52 weeks of abstinence, cravings still happen in individuals who had stopped smoking. Apart from the forces of neuroplasticity in the explanation of addiction, we can also situate addiction as a family disease via the mechanism of epigenetic basis of addiction. For instance, several studies have shown that even though there is a strong genetic vulnerability for addiction, but this is particularly worse for individuals with certain familial deficits. Gboyega et al. 2010 found that mother-father neglect is a particularly big familial deficit, especially for individuals with serotonin transporter gene has been shown consistently to be a predisposing gene for substance abuse. Similarly, Olsen et al. 2013 found that even for among individuals who carry the DRB4 gene, which is another genetic predisposing factor for substance abuse, but among these individuals, the risks are particularly greater in individuals with anxious avoidant parenting child, anxious avoidant parent-child attachment, and that's clearly a family problem. So family attachment is a very big problem. Also, Gboyega et al. 2013 has found very strong associations between childhood neglect, altered response to emotions, hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis dysfunction, and addiction severity. Studies have also found very strong links between poverty and stress during childhood and hyperactive amygdala and hypoactive prefrontal cortex. These two situations are risk factors for addiction. That is hyperactive amygdala and hypoactive prefrontal cortex. They are huge. They constitute a huge risk factor for addiction. In further demonstration of epigenetic basis of addiction, Brody et al. Demonstrated that parenting style is a significant moderator of the genetic vulnerability and substance abuse. In other words, parenting serves as a moderator between these two, such that given good parenting, warm, robust parenting style, the individual is less likely to, even though there's a genetic vulnerability, the individual is less likely to develop drug addiction problem. Specifically, Brody et al. Found that serotonin transporter status increases the likelihood of substance abuse over time. But fortunately, the association was greatly reduced by involved supportive parenting. These are all familial issues. Also, in another interesting study, Champion and Colley found that maternal care, especially tactile stimulation is characterized by holding, cuddling, and other warm interaction between mother and child, that this can significantly activate important genes that are necessary for healthy development and that can potentially reduce substance predisposition to substance use. On the other hand, individuals children that suffer from sufficient tactile stimulation, this can actually serve to silence these important DNAs, thereby predisposing the individuals more to addiction or substance use. Also, childhood adversity have been shown to be capable of inducing methylation in the promoter regions of specific genes and changes in gene transcription with increased risk for substance use disorder. Now, methylation is just an addition of an emotional cap to part of the DNA molecule, which in turn prevents certain genes from being expressed. For instance, if a child has a genetic tendency to be very, very intelligent, but if reared in environment characterized by childhood adversity, what we're saying here is that that can place an emotional cap on that potential DNA for intelligence, such that the individual will not express that tendency, and consequently that might lead to substance abuse. So this now, fortunately, empirical studies have indicated that DNA methylation is not an irreversible condition. Is a very good development, because it follows that those factors, those childhood adversity factors that induce the methylation in the first place, if reversed, the the chemical cap that is impeding normal development can as well be removed. And that probably explains why some individuals who did not thrive in one particular environment, when you move them to another environment, a more stimulating, a better environment, they do very well. I'm sure we know of several examples like that, of people who change environment to a more stimulating environment, and then they became a lot better than they were. Now, what are the familial risk factors for addiction? After a comprehensive review of the empirical literature, a number of factors emerge. And let me warn that the ones I'm presenting here are not in any way exhaustive. These are just some of them. These are the important ones. And they include poorly defined boundaries or rules to follow, parent-child insecure attachment, lack of bonding, early adverse experiences such as neglect, abuse, frustration. Sexual abuse is particularly very dangerous. That has featured consistently in almost all the studies. Sexual abuse is a huge risk factor. Poor adult role models, a drug-dependent biological family member, parental criminality, chaotic family life, and other factors. Now, what are the familial protective factors? They include family harmony and stability, warm, supportive parenting, clear, consistent discipline and boundaries, strong family values, having respect for authority and laws, support for education, parental monitoring, undivided attention for time for children. Of course, these are also not exhaustive. There are a host of other protective factors in the that can help especially the growing child. Challenges faced by families or persons with drug-related problems are almost inexhaustible, but they range from emotional or psychological to economic, financial, to social, to physical or health, a whole lot of factors. Now, as mentioned earlier on, in an attempt to maintain equilibrium, families with individuals having substance use disorder commonly make attempts. Many families try to do something, but unfortunately, in most instances, the effort is geared towards the wrong direction. Most of the attempts are dysfunctional in the final analysis. They help to strengthen the addiction rather than weakening it. And examples of such rules, dysfunctional rules that family members may unknowingly assume. Again, another point to mention is that most family members engage in these rules unknowingly, unconsciously. These include the addict, which is at the center of the whole thing, the enabler, the savior, the scapegoat, the mascot, and of course the lost child. Some authors, some practitioners have divided this into broad categories: the codependency behavior and then enabling behavior. But some others have adopted the listing of the factors, as we have done here. We can see the hero there, who is always trying to make the family proud, always going out of his way to excel. Of course, we are not saying that's bad. But in the case of the case of the family with addiction problem, the hero is doing this with a view to making the family forget about the addiction problem in the family, and so the problem remains unsolved. Okay, the same thing with the placater or the enabler, who takes up all sorts of responsibilities, including the ones that should be performed by other people, the addicted individual and other members of the family. He or she becomes the caretaker of the family. The essence is also to cover up the problem in the family. And of course, you have the mascot, who is the jester, who is the family jester, making jokes, sometimes inappropriate jokes, and the rest of them. The effect is also that the problem will remain largely unsolved. These various roles are very common in families. And let me also mention that it is not only these rules are not only applicable to addiction, they have also been applied, they have also been found in other problematic behavior. Now, having highlighted the dysfunctional rules that family members usually assume or knowingly assume, there are also healthy rules of family members that can help alleviate the problem. These include being supportive by being firm in non-judgmental manner and encouraging the addicted individual to take thoughtful and positive action. Then holding the drug user accountable for their behavior. Yes, one of the things that strengthens the drug use is that the drug users are not held accountable. They are not held accountable. Many families, so that others will not hear about the problem, they cover it up instead of holding the individual accountable. So one of the healthy ways of dealing with addiction in the family is by holding drug users accountable for their behavior and creating rewards for positive choices. The use of behavior modification is particularly recommended. Use of behavior modification strategies such as behavior contracting, contingency management, shaping, token economy, and the rest of them. In behavioral contracting, for instance, a contract can actually be entered into between the addicted person and the person and the significant others. Written contract, as though you are entering into a formal contract, that if you do this, then you get this. You look for things that the individual values, and then you attach it to the contract, and you make sure that as the individual complies with the desire, move towards the desired behavior, you reward accordingly. This is particularly the case when the person when you can combine it with shaping. In other words, you don't wait until the person has stopped taking drugs altogether, because if you want to do that, frustration might set in and the individual will forsake your reward and whatever and go back to drug use. But when you use shaping, when you combine shaping with behavioral contracting, shaping means that you reward each behavior as it moves towards the desired goal. You don't wait until you have the whole picture before you reward. If you want to wait for that, then frustration will set in on the part of the person you are helping. So fortunately, these procedures can be used by almost everybody with little training. They are not procedures that require extensive training. With minimal training, family members can use this. You don't need to. It does not necessarily call for the hiring of a practitioner. With little training, anybody can use this method. Also, another way of helping, another healthy role in the family is attending support groups. Attending support groups, by attending support groups, either support groups of affected individual or support groups of families of affected individual. The important thing here is that by attending such support groups, you learn more about addiction. You learn more about the problem. You know what to expect. so that you don't get unnecessarily frustrated. You even learn that relapse is possible and is very common and should be expected. So these are things you learn by attending support groups, and then you'll be able to appreciate the problem better, and the frustration is less likely to set in. And then creation of healthy boundaries and refusing to focus exclusively on the behavior of the affected persons. And learning about the treatment program and recovery process, that's very important. Yes, you learn, that happens when you attend support groups. And of course, participating in intake and recovery planning. Through all these healthy rules, the affected individual knows that he or she is not in this problem alone, and that alone is helpful. Now, why should family members get involved? Why is it important that family members, having highlighted the various ways that familiar factors play a role in addiction, and knowing the healthy roles that family can play in solving the problem? Why is it important? It is important because it helps keep loved ones engaged and motivated during treatment. Like I said earlier on, it gives the affected individual this feeling that he or she is not in this alone, that other people are sharing in his or her burden, and that is quite helpful, and that motivates the individual. And also in learning about addiction and its effect on the family, this is very, very important. Most of the times the family members do not even know anything about the problem. They don't know what effect it has on the problem, on the family. But by getting involved, you get to know a lot about addiction and its effect on the family. Then understanding how treatment works and what to expect, including relapse. Enabling family members to voice feelings and concerns. Offering the loved ones a high level of appropriate support during treatment, easing feelings of fear, anger, and stress. This is very, very important for families of persons with substance use disorder. Fear, anger, and stress and confusion are common things. But by getting involved yourself, you'll be able to appreciate the problem better, and then you are likely to suffer from these feelings of fear, anger, and stress and confusion. Then getting involved helps family members to develop skills and strategies to help a loved one stay on the path to recovery. And it helps improve family communication skills. And it also helps address any mental health issues within the family, if there is any. We all know that there's a high comorbidity between substance use disorder and psychiatric morbidity. So getting involved also helps the family to address that if the problem arises. What are the goals of family-based approaches? Now, there are a number of family-based approaches to treatment of addiction. These approaches are different from the traditional models that we are all used to, such as cognitive behavioral therapy, motivational interviews, because these family-based approaches, as a matter of necessity, involves members of the family. And some of these approaches actually involve the community, the school system, and other agents that are important in the life of the individual. And what are the goals? The goals are to improve communication in the family, to help family make changes to affect the person with the problem, and very importantly, to keep substance use disorder from moving to the next generation, and to help family solve problems, to help family become aware of own needs, to provide genuine, enduring healing for members, and to shift power to parental figures. The major types of family-based approaches are the brief strategic family therapy, family behavioral therapy, functional family therapy, multidimensional family therapy, and multi-systemic therapy. I'll just say a few words about each of these. But like I said earlier on, the emphasis on each of these is the family, that the family must get involved. For brief strategic family therapy, it is based on the notion that problem behaviors stem from unhealthy family interactions. That's the underlying assumption of this therapy, and that's what the therapy is geared towards addressing, that the problem started as a result of unhealthy family interactions, and therefore by bringing in family members into treatment, it is hoped that these unhealthy family interactions, which precipitated the problem in the first place, will be solved, and then new insight into the problem will be gained. And without that, the problems will remain no matter what or other things you do. Also, family behavioral therapy combines a number of behavior modification strategies, such as behavior contracting, contingency management, shaping, token economy, air shooting, and so forth. Combines these to address not only substance abuse, but other problem behaviors as well, such as conduct disorder, delinquency, and so forth. So it also brings in the family members, but instead of just addressing the substance use problem alone, it addresses other equally important problems. Then the functional family therapy combines a family system view of family functioning with behavior techniques to improve communication, problem solving, and conflict resolution, as well as parenting skills in the family. Those are the things that the functional family therapy address. Both the multidimensional family therapy and the multisystemic therapy, in addition to seeing the problem from an individual and familial perspective only, these approaches also view the problem as a societal problem. Therefore, these two approaches bring in people outside the family, like the school system, the juvenile justice system, especially if the individual has been, if it's a child, if it's an underage and he or she has been incarcerated in a juvenile home before, or has had a problem with the legal system before. So those agents are also brought in trying to help the individual. So these two systems, since they see the problem even beyond the family to other important agents of socialization. Now, before I round up, I think it's interesting to know that these family-based approaches have been shown to be more effective than the traditional traditional treatment of addiction. Daly and Hamilton in 2015 undertook a comprehensive review of literature to examine the relative efficacy of family-based approaches. And they found that these approaches relative to others have been shown to have higher treatment uptakes in the region of 64% to 86% success rate. That's quite high. And better engagement rate in treatment of substance use disorder members, better rate of retention and completion, reduced symptoms, higher rates of abstinence, reduced emotional burden, less anger, depression, anxiety, even better employment outcomes, and the rest of them. And even it has been shown to be more cost effective relative to the other approaches. It is very convenient to blame, in conclusion, it's very convenient to blame the individual with substance use disorder instead of looking at the issue holistically. While I'm not absolving this individual from any blame, the position here is that the emphasis should be situated holistically and realistically, and family members should be involved if efforts are to yield long-term reports. Prevention should also take cognizance of the various familial factors implicated in drug use or addiction. Once again, I want to thank ISSUP Nigeria, my president, Dr. Martins, our National Publicity Secretary, Dr. Bawo James, other members of the executive of Nigerian chapter, and members of the national chapter generally. And I also thank ISSUP Global, Olivia and your team and all the technical team for your support for our national chapter and for making this series to become a reality. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for your attention. Good afternoon.
Thank you for the very robust presentation, Dr. Abikoye. Yeah. Thank you for the robust presentation, Dr. Abikoye. Particularly pleased because the presentation is based or premised on very strong evidence that you were able to provide. And I think one of the slides was very interesting for me because you talked about the simple things that anybody who is a practitioner in the substance abuse field can do, and the fact that you don't necessarily need a lot of training to be able to provide support for families. And also because you talked about the fact that family interventions have longer lasting effects on the modifying drug use compared to many other therapies that we are aware of. Well, your camera is moving now. It tends to be a lot slow. I don't know, Dr. Abikoye, could you turn off your camera and then turn it back on again? Could you try that so that we can see you when you? Okay. So
can you see me now?
Yes, we can. Just that it tends to freeze a lot. Okay. Dr. Martin, over to you, please.
Let's see how many questions we can take. I know the time is fast spent. If you could take maybe a few questions, let's see how much we can accommodate within the limited time. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So we take the first question. Someone wants to know, how do you help family members who will not admit that they have a problem? I think what the person asking this question is saying is, there was one slide where you talked about various things that family members may be doing that may be perpetuating drug use in the affected relative. You talk about enablers and the rest. Okay, so how do you help family members who do not see that they may be part of the problem or they may be contributing to the problem?
Okay, thank you very much for that question. I think that's a very common problem. Most of the times, the family members are not aware that they are part of the problem. It's a very common thing. And as practitioners, it is our duty to find a way of making them to realize that. If they didn't realize that on their own, we could help bring them to that realization. After getting some background information, we should be able to convince them on how they are, the kinds of roles they are playing that are strengthening the drug use problem or that are making it difficult for the individual to be able to get over the problem. I think it's left for us to help them come to terms with that. Normally, everybody will tell you that no, I'm not at fault. It's his fault. He's the one that I gave him everything. I did everything for him. We are such a wonderful family. We provide everything for him, but still he went and take that stuff. Of course, their denial may not necessarily be a malicious thing. They didn't know. They may not know that certain things that they did have actually contributed to the problem. So it's for us to help them with that realization so that they can do the right thing.
Okay, thank you, sir. Chris Adabo from Oka in Anambra State has this question. It says, holding drug users accountable for positive choices in a situation where a drug is rebuked, I think it means rebuked for negative choices, will it not worsen the drug user's problem? It needs more light on that. I think there was a part where you emphasized
that they should be held responsible. Yes. By that, I didn't mean that they should be rebuked or beaten or scolded. That's not what I meant. I didn't mean that. What I mean by holding them accountable for their behavior is that you let them realize that what they are doing is not good, and the negative impact that their behavior is causing the family, instead of glossing over that and make the individual not to have that sense of, let the person have that sense of responsibility that yes, you are causing so and so to the family. That's what I mean. It doesn't necessarily have to do with beating him or taking any drastic. Yes, I agree. If you take any action, it may rather exacerbate the problem. So that's not what I meant. But essentially, the individual must be made to know the impact, realize the impact of what he or she is doing.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Martin, do you want to take the next set of questions, or I continue?
Okay, thank you, Bawo, and thank you once again, Dr. Abikoye. There was a question on way out for persons with alcohol use disorders. I know you have mentioned many of them, talking about the psychosocial and behavioral interventions. Let me quickly add that there are other pharmacotherapeutic medications that have been approved for the treatment of alcohol use disorders, and that is why we also encourage that persons with alcohol use disorders to at least seek proper treatment so that they are prescribed these medications. Of course, for example, we have the disulfiram, naltrexone, composite, and so on. So these are medications that at least have been approved, I would say even globally, but that notwithstanding, it is better to receive this prescription from the appropriate authority or therapist in this case. So I think that adds to what you have already shared on that. Bawo, can we take one or two more question? I know the time is spent, then I just use 1 or 2 minutes to wrap up.
Okay. All right. Dr. Abikoye, Richard is saying that the term dysfunctional family seems rather judgmental and stigmatizing. Is there a way we could deliver the same message, perhaps using terms that would help the family? Because if you say, oh, it's a dysfunctional family, that's why they're having these problems.
Okay, thank you very much, my Dr. Bao. Of course, I didn't mean that you are going to sit the family down and tell them that your family is dysfunctional, or you are, this just an academic this thing. We are not going to say this to the family that you are dysfunctional or the family dynamics in your home is dysfunctional and all that. Yes, I agree. If possible, we can put it in a milder way, in a more offensive way. If we want to address the family, you don't use offensive words. And also, let me corroborate what my president has said earlier on, so that people will not go away with the wrong impression. By highlighting the efficacy of these family-based approaches, I'm not in any way watering down the importance of pharmacotherapy. If anybody has a problem of addiction, the first thing to do is to seek medical help. What we are saying here is that it makes it better when, in addition to seeking medical help, you also do some of these things. That's what we are saying before people go away with that impression that once you use family, it's not the intention. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, Dr. Martin, I think you would answer the final question. Someone wants to know if the presentation will be available and if certificates of attendance will be issued. Over to you.
Yes, Yes, the presentation will be available and will be shared soon, hopefully within the next 2 or 3 days. So time is not always our friend.
Will certificates of attendance be issued after the certificates of attendance?
Yes, certificate of attendance will be issued.
Okay.
Thank you. So once again, time is not always our friend. So much have been shared within 1 hour. That addiction is a disease of neuroplasticity. Of course, we have better understanding of the epigenetic basis of addiction. Of course, the risk and protective factors for substance use, challenges faced by families of persons with substance use disorders, of course, roles of families in the treatment of substance use disorders, including prevention of the use of substance by family members, and also evidence-based family approaches to treatment of substance use disorders. Of course, the presentation has reminded us that with appropriate parental monitoring, genetic vulnerability to drug addiction can be reduced significantly. So as parents and professionals, how do we make good use of this learning experience? That is what we shall be working on in the months ahead. So once again, on behalf of the Board of Trustees of ISSUP Nigeria, the Executive Council, I want to say thank you, speaker, for today. And thank you, my co-moderator for today's session. And for the participants, thank you for joining us. And we do hope that you set out the date again, 28th of January 2021, to join us for the 4th session. And I want to assure you that's going to be another wonderful and interesting session. So to ISSUP Global, we are most grateful for your support. And thank you, everyone, for being part of this. So let's do it again some other time and say bye for now. Thank you, everyone.